Welcome to the 6th video in the Colored Pencil course, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. In this video, we're going to take a look at composition and apply it to still life. In this module, we'll take a look at a few principles pertaining to composition and apply them to a still life drawing. What is composition? Composition refers to the manner in which elements are arranged or laid out within a picture plane. The composition of the artwork affects how a viewer interacts visually with your work. We'll look at 3 different compositions and decide which one is the best based on a few principles. Here's a look at the 3 compositions we'll choose from. While there are many factors that can affect composition, we'll take a look at 3 in this module. These include eye flow or eye movement, variety and unity, and the rule of thirds. What is eye flow or eye movement? Eye flow or eye movement refers to the way a viewer's eye flows or moves through a work of art. Our goal should be to guide the viewer's eye through the work without restricting the flow or confusing the viewer. Let's now evaluate how a viewer's eye may move through the compositions that we have. In this first composition, how do you think the viewer's eye would move through this piece? One possibility is that the viewer's eye may enter at the top portion of the composition at the centrally located bottle, then almost get stuck right in the center while the decision is made whether to move to the left or the right. This does not create a good eye flow. Let's take a look at our second arrangement. How do you feel a viewer's eye would move through this composition? While this second composition is definitely an improvement over the first as far as eye movement goes, it is still somewhat restrictive. A viewer's eye may enter the piece at the top portion of the picture plane and move downward. It'll move around in a circle, but may get stuck in the center of the picture plane. This is not good for eye movement. It doesn't allow the viewer's eye to move throughout the entire piece. Instead, it gets stuck right in the center. Let's take a look at the third composition. How do you feel a viewer's eye may move through this composition? The third composition provides for a much greater eye flow through the piece. The viewer's eye may enter at the wine bottle in the background, move downward towards the grapes, over to the wine glass, and then out the picture plane with the grapes in the foreground. This encourages movement throughout the piece and encourages the viewer to see all of the elements within the picture plane. Let's next take a look at variety and unity. Variety and unity should be considered in our compositions as well. Our goal should be to provide variety while still keeping the work unified. Too much variety or too much unity can detract from a work. A balance of variety and unity within a work is desired. Let's again take a look at our 3 compositions. Our first arrangement is definitely varied. There's quite a bit of variety in this piece as each element is spread out from the other elements. There's a lot of negative space in between, but it's lacking unity. Our second composition definitely has the unity, but in this case it's lacking variety. There's not enough negative space between the subjects. Our third composition, however, has a balance between variety and unity. While there is variety and space between the elements, they are overlapping in areas, creating a sense of unity. Let's next take a look at the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a compositional device in which the picture plane is divided into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. Placing elements on the lines that divide the picture plane results in compositions that are aesthetically more successful. Let's take a look at our compositions in relation to the rule of thirds. In our first composition, we can see that there aren't really any elements that are lining up with any of the division lines that are dividing the picture plane into thirds. The line that divides the table from the background is close, but not quite on the line. In our second example, we can see that we do have some elements that are lining up with the rule of thirds. The wine bottle with the purple label is in alignment with one of the lines. and the line where the table meets the background is very close. In our third compositional example, we have multiple elements that line up with the lines that divide the picture plane. In this case, the line that divides the table from the background is right on one of the lines. The two wine bottles that are in the background are also near one of the lines of division. The grapes are also very close. Therefore, our third composition is the best of the three to choose to work from. Now that we've chosen our composition, we can draw our colored pencil drawing. I'll begin by drawing out the composition using an F graphite pencil. Then I'll lift the areas of graphite so it doesn't mix in with subsequent applications of colored pencil. I'm going to start with some of the details that exist on the corks. For this first cork, there are some areas of letters that happen on the cork. So I'm going to start with those areas because I feel that they're important to capture in the finished drawing. I'll also apply medium to light pressure to begin to create somewhat of an underpainting in this area. In fact, in this drawing, we're going to take it a section at a time, but we're going to create a small underpainting in each one of the sections. In other words, I'm going to be focusing on creating the value first before I start layering the local color. Once I've got the values established, I can go in and start layering the local colors that are observed in the photo reference. Once some of the darker values are established, I'll layer over the top of them using a ginger root color, followed by a cream color. As these colors are applied, some burnishing will happen, making transitions a little bit smoother. Next, I'll take some white and burnish the edges a bit further, creating a stronger highlight on the side where the light source is originating from. I can add some of the intricate details that exist on the cork right on top of the burnished areas using a dark umber. I'll also use the cream one last time to burnish the transitions further. Now it's time to move on to the label on the wine bottle on the right side. Here again, I'm going to start with an underpainting, establishing the darkest values first. I'll use medium to light to even heavy pressure in some areas to accomplish this. Again, I'm only focusing on the areas of value here. Because the label is highly reflective, I need to concentrate on creating areas of high contrast between the values. Therefore, I'll have dark values right next to light values in order to create this illusion of reflectivity. Once I've created the underpainting, I can go right on top with the local color. I'll layer crimson red directly on top of the dark umber. Now, using a white, I can begin to burnish those colors together. I'll continue to switch back and forth between the crimson red and the white until I get values and colors that I'm pleased with. The dark umber can also be used to adjust the colors and values as well. Now I can work on the little piece of glass that is showing right on top of the label. I'm going to use a dark green for this over the top of the areas that I've established with the dark umber. I'm also going to use the color lime peel to create some of the lighter values of green that exist there as well. I can apply heavy pressure here and really build up the color on the surface quickly. Next, I'll move on to the label on the other wine bottle. I'll approach it the exact same way by establishing an underpainting of the darker values first. Here again, I'm just paying attention to the values at this point, looking at the darks and lights that exist in the photo reference. I'll apply more pressure to create darker values and lighter pressure to create midtones and lighter values. Now I can go on top with the local color. The color I'm using to layer on top of the dark umber is dark purple. Just as I did with the underpainting, I can adjust the amount of pressure that I put on the pencil to affect the value. To burnish the color and to create smooth transitions between light and dark values, I'll use white over the top of the dark purple. The dark purple is used again, this time with heavier pressure. And then the dark umber is applied directly on top. I'll use a colorless blender this time to burnish these colors together. To create some of the text that exists on the side of the wine bottle label, I'll use a metallic silver color, and I'll burnish that with a bit of white. Here's a look at where we're at so far in the drawing. Now it's time to address some of the reflections on the wine bottles themselves. Here again, I'll begin by creating an underpainting using dark umber. This area is highly reflective, so here again we'll have areas of high contrast between values. It's important to take your time and pay special attention to those areas of contrast, as this will lead to the illusion of reflection and transparency that's needed to create a convincing wine bottle. Carefully add darker values around the area of text that exists on the wine bottle. It's okay if the text is not totally legible in the finished piece. We do, however, want it to appear like letters. Now I can start layering some of the local color that exists in the wine bottle. In this case, I'll start with olive green and go directly on top of the underpainting. In this second application, I'm still paying close attention to my photo reference. It's important to look for transitions of color and value that exist in your photo reference. I'll use a colorless blender to work in the initial application of olive green on top of the underpainting. Next, I'll use the lime peel color to start creating transitions between the olive green areas and the areas of highlight on the bottle. I'll burnish some of these areas in and create a few highlights using a white. I can darken up some of the areas of darker value and increase the contrast using the dark umber. I can also add some of the details that are visible in the reflections on the wine bottle using the dark umber. Indigo blue is used to darken up some of the areas of darker value, as well as add a bit of variety to the green on the wine bottle. The wine inside of the bottle is made visible by creating a bit of contrast between the top portion of the bottle and the middle portion of the bottle. This is accomplished by darkening up areas around the areas of highlight using the dark umber. Next, indigo blue is used on the label on the wine bottle to create contrast between the glass and the label. A few more details are added to the bottle to finish up the first wine bottle. Now it's time to move on to our second wine bottle. We'll begin this wine bottle in the same way that we did the first wine bottle, by creating an underpainting using dark umber. Here again, we need to pay special attention to the areas of contrast and value that exist on the bottle. These areas can be seen as simple shapes that can be filled in with the appropriate value. It's important not to overthink what you're seeing. Instead, simplify it into easy-to-draw shapes. Take the drawing a shape at a time so that you're not overwhelmed with the amount of information and detail that you actually see. I'll slowly begin to darken up the areas of value. In the process, I'll create a range of value. There'll be subtle changes in value that are noticeable on the wine bottle. Once I'm content with my underpainting, I can start with the olive green color, layering it directly on top of our underpainting. Adjustments are made to the amount of pressure placed on the pencil according to the value that's observed in the photo reference. For areas of lighter value, medium to light pressure is applied to the pencil. For areas of darker value, medium to heavy pressure is applied to the pencil. Like with any drawing, it's a process of going back and forth between your reference and the surface of your paper. Gather information from your reference or subject and put that information on your paper. Think in terms of color, value, line, and shape, instead of what you're actually drawing. Next, we'll burnish in the application of olive green and dark umber using a colorless blender. We'll also use white to establish some of the areas of highlight on the bottle. Doing so will also burnish some of the applications that have already been applied, creating smoother transitions between darker and lighter values. Lime peel is also used to add a bit of variety to the greens that exist on the wine bottle, and the dark umber is used to darken up some of the darker values even further, increasing the contrast. We can also add some of the details that are visible in the reflection on the wine bottle using the dark umber. We'll add the olive green on top of the applications of dark umber to make it more true to the colors and values that are observed in the photo reference. We'll also use indigo blue to darken up some of the areas a bit further and add a bit of interest to the green on the wine bottle. With the glass completed, we can move on to the label. We'll begin with the dark umber, just drawing out the patterns and shapes that we see in the photo reference. We'll create a contour line drawing initially, and then we'll use that contour line drawing to complete an underpainting. Again, we're simply concentrating on the dark and light values that are observed. Indigo blue is layered on top of the dark umber. Heavy pressure is applied to create a nice, dark, rich color. Dark umber is layered on top to burnish the color completely. Colors observed in the label from the photo reference are added to the drawing. In this case, indigo blue is added first, followed by the dark purple. White is used to establish the border on the label, and also to burnish some of the applications of color that have been applied on the inside. It's also used on the lettering on the label. A dark umber is used on the edge of the label to create a stronger line between the two wine bottles. The back portion of the label is addressed the same way, first with dark umber, followed by indigo blue. Because this side is receiving light, white is used to create a lighter value. Here's where we are so far in the drawing process. Here's what was discussed in this module. In this module, we took a look at composition basics, which included eye flow and eye movement. We should try to create a composition that encourages our viewer's eye to move through the piece. We also talked about creating variety while maintaining unity. We need both variety and unity in our compositions. We also took a look at the rule of thirds. By placing elements within a third of our picture plane, we can create compositions that are more aesthetically successful. In the next video, we're going to finish this composition.